Hello everyone, my name is Monica Lebron and I am the Deputy Athletic Director at Tulane University, and I'm here today to serve on a panel for Athletic Director U. Today we have Jason Butikofer. He's the Director of Athletics at Southern Utah University, and we have Matt Tanney, also the Director of Athletics at Western Illinois University. And today our panel topic is what's it like in the chair, and really even more importantly, what's it like in those first 90 days? What's it like early on? And certainly as a deputy, I want to know, but there's so many people watching us today that are going to want to know as well. We want to be able to prepare ourselves to be where you guys are sitting. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you a series of questions, and if you guys are ready to go, we'll start.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. So let's start with what surprised you most when you got to the chair? And Jason, we'll start with you.
For me, I worked for great people coming up, so I was pretty prepared in a lot of regards. I think probably the thing that surprised me the most is when you move into the chair, and I was a sports supervisor at West Point at Army, and I oversaw 14 sports. So I think the military infrastructure at West Point kind of adds another layer of support and kind of engagement with the cadets there. So I was the sports supervisor, but I felt a sense of responsibility to the 14 teams and the cadet athletes that comprised them. But about a week into sitting in the chair, there was a moment where I was just kind of overcome with the importance of the fact that I have 370 18 to 26-year-olds whose parents have entrusted me specifically, and obviously there's a crescendo of people that kind of help with those support services, but ultimately the buck stops with you as it relates to student athlete welfare. And I think starting this job just a little short of 2 years ago, student athlete welfare was very much front of mind nationally. So to kind of step into the chair in that moment in time and also kind of be really in tune with what that means and have kind of that intrinsic moment, it was pretty powerful, and it made me quickly focus as I crafted a vision on sports medicine, strength and conditioning, mental wellness, nutrition, all those aspects. And still, that's probably the most enjoyable part of my 2 years at this point, is that student athlete engagement and understanding what are the challenges, what are the issues, where are the opportunities from the perspective of your student athletes. And that's been a lot of fun. And you get to, I've gotten to know a lot of great young men and women through that engagement.
Awesome. Matt, is there anything you'd add?
Yeah, a little bit to that. I think it's my sort of positioning into the role was a little bit different. I served as the Deputy Athletic Director at Western Illinois University, and I stepped into the role on an interim basis for 6 to 9 months before I took on the position permanently. And I think the level of access that's expected of the athletic director, regardless of what my role was at the institution previously, still had a lot of work with student athletes, coaches, staff, all of those different sort of contact points within the department. But until you're in the chair, I don't think you have a full appreciation for the number of external constituencies and the things that flow to you that might not otherwise happen until you're in that position. And so I think there is certainly that realization. It's like sometimes people will skip 2 or 3 steps because they want to speak to you as the athletic director.
Okay. And Matt, I'll come right back to you. If you could do your first 90 days over again, what would you do differently? Yeah,
and to build on that a little bit, I guess, is on an interim basis, it's a unique situation in terms of what you can do and what you feel like you can do when you're in that interim role. Had the opportunity presented itself to go back and do it over again, I probably would have looked at maybe having a more aggressive sort of strategic rollout of some of my initiatives and some of my plans and programming. But I think when you're in the interim role, you slow that down or you pause that a little bit because you don't have that the full authority. You don't want to throw everything, the grand balance off within the department. It's more of a consistency and a maintenance at that point, I think, in the interim role. Now, once I stepped into the role on a full-time basis, I felt like I was able to do more of those things more aggressively and more efficiently. Okay. But certainly that would be one.
Okay. Is there anything you'd do differently, Jason?
I know in the first question, Matt hit on stakeholders. And I think I did a really thorough job of identifying who's important, internally, externally. When I say thorough job, adequate, it's probably a better word. I did an adequate job. I think if I did it over again, or if I had, in the next opportunity that maybe comes along, I think I'll be a lot more deliberate in understanding, the different constituencies and who's important. There's an enhanced or an increased level of sensitivity with the fact that you're the athletic director and everybody's looking for you to love them and who needs love. And, I thought about it, and I talked to a couple different people. I think next time I'll probably talk to a much broader advisory constituency to let me know who's who so I don't miss anybody.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, again, I'm sitting in the Deputy AD chair. If you could go back to that position, is there anything you'd do differently to prepare yourself for the AD chair or to make yourself a more attractive candidate?
I think when I served in that role at our institution, I was consuming as much as I could. I took on every project that the athletic director would throw at me. I was really as open and welcoming to any of those conversations as possible in anticipation of having an opportunity like this one day. And so, if I could go back and do it again, I would maybe be even more direct with my supervisor and the athletic director, and say, what can I specifically do to make your job easier, and what can I specifically do to help myself grow professionally, and what types of projects and those types of things can you have? I think sometimes staff are either reluctant to do that or they're hesitant for some reason, and I think an overwhelming majority of athletic directors are more than happy to help their staff grow and help them take the next step.
For me, at Army West Point, working with Boo Corrigan, Boo is wise beyond his years, and I've come to develop an appreciation for that. During my time there, and now that I've been departed from there for a while, I think I would have listened to him more, and just from the standpoint that my personal and professional growth was a partnership with him, and he was very engaged in that. And there was times where I maybe questioned, what he was wanting me to do or the direction he was moving me, and not in an adversarial way, but just in general, like, okay, is this really the best thing for me? Is this going to get me, to where I need to go? And there were times where I'm like, oh yeah, that's spot on. And there are other times where I'm like, I'm not so sure, or maybe hesitated, on some things. And again, with his the lineage of his family, I mean, he knows what he's talking about,
right.
And I should have listened more.
So Boo, if you're watching, he's sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's really interesting because there's times Troy Dannon, our athletic director at Tulane, has certainly asked me to challenge him and don't be a yes man and certainly be his equal. But I do question things sometimes,
Yeah.
and so that's actually really good advice to me.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, Troy's going to have the answer, so just relax.
Exactly.
So I appreciate
Exactly,
that advice
yeah.
for me sitting in the chair right now.
Yeah, and I think Boo reminds me every once in a while of some of those things.
Oh,
so.
that's great. That's great. And remind your deputy, because I'm
Yes.
sure at times you've been questioned.
Yeah,
but
it trickles down,
Right,
right?
right.
Pay it forward.
Very cool. Very cool. So, there's so many people you guys would probably want to thank. Think back to those first 90 days, though. Who helped you survive? I mean, who was your first call? And if you can call them right now to say, hey, thanks for helping me get through this. Thanks for answering my calls. Thanks for mentoring me through those first 90 days. Who would it be for each of you? Jason, we'll start with you.
So getting back, Boo Corrigan, it would go without saying, just kind of the preparation and really maybe the 2 weeks or 3 weeks in transition, where I was kind of winding down West Point and some of the things that he communicated to me and educated me on that kind of stuck with me. And then in the first 90 days, I was in a unique situation. David Benedict, the current athletic director at UConn, who's a close friend and a mentor, played football at Southern Utah University. And he's the reason that I was involved in the search and it came to fruition. So it was kind of a unique situation to have a mentor and a really close friend have an innate knowledge of the landscape and the people, his former teammates on the football team and people that really kind of helped get me acclimated. I think at one point in time, he was at the University of Auburn in the COO role, and I think at one point in time in a phone conversation, he said, it kind of feels like I'm the AD at two, that I'm the deputy AD at two places right now, or something, some comment like that. So I leaned on him hard and asked him a lot of questions, and we've known each other since 2000, and he's always been there with me at every step of the way, and I think that intensified for that 90-day period. We're back to a little bit more of a normal communication schedule, but he was unbelievable in that process. Yeah,
that's great.
I think professionally, I brag on our head coaches a lot. At Western Illinois University, I think we have an outstanding and dynamic group of head coaches. And when I stepped into that role, our head coaches were all on board, and they all understood the direction that I wanted to go and the vision that I had. And so to have that broad-based support from a head coach group was really important. Our president was very supportive in terms of we changed some administrative structures when I stepped into the role. Previously, athletics had reported to student services. When I stepped in, it reported directly to the president. And so to have that direct line of communication with the university president, I think is significant, and it's been really valuable moving forward. Now it's professionally. Personally, I don't think anybody that's in this business can do what they do without some sort of family background. And so, I'd call my wife right now. She's a rock, and I think a lot of people in this business have people like that that stand behind them. That because the first 90 days you don't see a lot of those people.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you guys for sharing that. So if you could talk to your current staffs right now, and you could give them a piece of advice on what would make your lives easier if they knew this nugget, what would it be? Matt, I'll come back to you to start. What would you tell them that would ultimately make your job as the AD a little bit easier?
Take ownership. Be fully invested in the enterprise. And when I say that, I don't mean that my staff aren't, but I think it really takes to have success at our level, at the FCS level especially, with maybe a little more limited resources, and a little more limited on staff. You really have to have everybody pulling in the same direction. And I think we're fortunate enough to have that at Western Illinois University, but you really have to have everybody on the same page. And it's never perfect. You're always striving towards it. You're always trying to get better in that respect. But the more cohesion you can have with your staff in terms of moving in that direction and following my vision and the vision of the department, I think is really important.
Jason?
I think something that we've talked about a lot, and you'd say I'm a very direct communicator, so I leave very few things unsaid. So it's hard to say, what would I say? But I think the two things that we've really just entirely or talked about consistently are work ethic and accountability. And I think the foundation of success, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and those were non-negotiables for me growing up in the household that I grew up in, and really instilling that in our staff. And really, the work ethic, this is a tough industry. You put in a lot of hours, and a lot of times there's not a lot to question in that regard, but the accountability piece, if you commit to a coach or, making our staff understand the greater aspects of what's going on and how they impact the student athletes and our coaches and how it all kind of fits together, it was a big piece of that communication. But we use the word accountability a ton, because our coaches rely on us. And I think those two elements, work ethic and accountability, are probably where we've made the largest gains, and we've raised a few dollars too. But those are kind of the foundational pillars that we've really just talked a ton about, and it's made a big difference. And I think people come to the office with that mentality. I'm here for I'm here for 8 hours today. I'm gonna work hard, and I'm gonna run things to the ground, follow up, follow through, whether that's with me, whether it's an associate AD or a head coach or a student athlete issue. And I'm really proud about where we've gotten to in that regard.
And to build on that a little bit, because we've taken that accountability concept as well, and you see it translate when you preach that with your head coaches and your staff. You see it trickle down to your student athletes, because they're the ones working with them on the day-to-day basis. And so we've seen even an uptick, I think, in our student athletes understanding that culture. So it's gotten down to that individual level as well, and that's been a great benefit.
We've talked a lot to our coaches about that on a couple different occasions, is if you expect something of your student athletes, and again, think about the level of accountability that a student athlete has on a daily basis, whether that's academics, whether that's socially, or whether that's athletically, and to have coaches, head coaches or assistant coaches that don't also carry the torch in that same way, that to me is it's frustrating. It's somewhat hypocritical in a lot of ways, and we've really been very forthright in our conversations in that regard. And we had some coaches that hadn't needed a little wake-up call in that regard, like, hey, you're asking your student athletes to this. If I ask you to do something, or your sports supervisor asks you to do something, again, it's not negotiable.
Yeah.
You know, this is what you're doing. Just like going to class isn't negotiable for your track and field student athlete.
We all have to pull in the same direction.
Correct.
Make your lives easier.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about family. Matt, I'll come back to you. What are your outlets? How do you, and I know this is a hard job and it takes a lot of time.
Sure.
How do you find balance? What are your outlets?
I would not be truthful if I was saying that I've got it figured out yet, because I think it's very difficult to do in this business, and to find, especially extended periods of time when you can sort of take a break and get away. But I think that is the key. Identify, I'll look at our schedules for the entire year and say, when is there a pocket of 3 to 4 days where we don't have any contests going on that it's not absolutely mission critical for me to be in the office for 2 or 3 days, and maybe try to carve some time out there. I've been a little unconventional about it in terms of maybe there's a time 2 or 3 days in a window of the basketball season, or in the spring, or even in the fall when things are really busy. But just being thoughtful and really looking down the road to try to find those small, and they are small windows where you can maybe just unplug for a day or two. I think that's really important. And then on a day-to-day basis, exercise and some of those things. I know it's people say that all the time and it's cliche, but there's absolutely value to that. I think the research supports it.
I'm in a little bit of a different situation than Matt because I don't have a family. I have a family, just I don't have a wife and kids. So, so I'm a little bit of a different situation. I think kind of within a given week, I always try to, if possible, Sundays or a day that I try to keep to myself, if at all possible. I would say that within that day, I take a series of naps is kind of something that I don't have to worry about the kids and the wife. So I would say, I'm averaging about 4 naps on a Sunday. So that's a big thing. And then I think kind of more bigger picture wise, 2 times a year I travel internationally, and I've kind of committed myself to that. And I have some friends that live overseas and have kind of taken the time to do that. And planning those trips and kind of looking forward to those trips are something that kind of keeps me a little bit balanced. But I'm with Matt. I don't have it figured out. I would say that I'm slightly horrible at it. I'm a 4:30 a.m. type of guy, and I'm going early, and I'm trying to get out in front of the day. But I think it's important, I think it's trying to find the little strategies and being deliberate and strategic about how you do that. Even if it's something as small as, hey, I'm not gonna use my car today. I'm gonna go for a few walks and take a couple naps. I mean, it can be pretty simple.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
I gotcha. What is your next trip?
My next trip, I'm going to Budapest and London in a couple weeks.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to that. And my other trip this year was Morocco, Barcelona, and London. So yeah, so it's fun, and they're quick trips, like 8-9 day trips, but it makes all the world of difference, and kind of the anticipation, and obviously the actual relaxation that comes out of it.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, safe travels on your next one.
Thank you.
And we're running short on time, so I will leave you with this one last question, and it's kind of open-ended, free for all. What's the best part about the job? And Matt, we'll start with you.
I'd say without hesitation, having the ability in this position to directly impact the student-athlete experience, and even when you're in a deputy role or a senior level role, you have significant input, but you don't get to make that decision all the time. And I think in this position, having the ability to make that decision, set the direction, and say this is what we're going to do, and to really impact the student-athlete experience, for me, no doubt about it.
I would say I'm somewhat, my answer is probably very similar to Matt's. 370 student athletes. I've just loved getting to know them. To my earlier point, I love being responsible. I have a lot of passion in that, and I think you get this. It's intrinsic. It's just something that is inside of you every day, and I've really enjoyed that part. It's added meaning to my life. That has been very positive, and we have some great kids. Great young men and women that comprise our program, and it's been a world of fun. Supporting them, and to Matt's earlier point, finding ways to make gains, raising money or we're working on building a sports performance facility, just seeing the excitement that they have in those endeavors, or the fact that we're going to up the ante with nutrition this year. And they, where I'm at right now, things aren't taken for granted. So when you make those gains, just the appreciation that you feel from your student athletes it's
just
irreplaceable.
a quick story on that. So we renovated our football locker room in the off season, and they had had metal lockers for years and years and years, and we kind of unveiled it on a Saturday during spring practice. And some of our seniors that came in remembered it. They've been living in it for 3 years. We had some of our seniors that were in tears, just being in that space for the first time. And you just can't put a value on that. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Again, we had Jason Butikofer, Southern Utah University Director of Athletics, and Matt Tanney, Director of Athletics at Western Illinois University. So once again, I am Monica Lebron, Tulane University. Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it at Athletic Director U, and we'll see you next time.